I'd like to welcome you at this time to session number 17. We were talking about the Star Wars trilogies, and we'll go back for a moment to episode 3, The Revenge of the Sith. Although it was conceived and written several years before it was released, it was inspired by higher positive unseen forces to show those of us living at the time of its release what many then noticed and remarked on: the similarity between the storyline in the movie and the world events of that time, 2005 to 2006. From that, we will learn one additional important lesson. Where the welfare of the galaxy, or solar system, or planet, or country, and its inhabitants are concerned, one should perhaps consider the thought that it might not always be wise to just blindly accept as truth, without further thought or question, every word that comes from the mouths of top leaders. I will at this time, because of its importance, once again state that which was mentioned in our other series of videos that looks at life from a more material point of view. Padme Amidala, one of the film's main characters, wisely but sadly observes during a particularly significant session of the Galactic Senate, quote, "This is how liberty dies, to thunderous applause," end quote. I realize also that it's usually considered taboo to make comparisons of those in power at a particular time to those who controlled Nazi Germany during World War II. But I feel that the lesson here is so very relevant to what was going on at and somewhat before the time that this film was released that it compels me to point out to you once again, reluctantly but I feel needfully, as I did in the series of videos made from a material perspective, a quote from that earlier era. Perhaps you'll better understand and hopefully forgive me as I now give you that rather radical but pertinent quote here that was made by Nazi Reichsmarshal and Luftwaffe Chief Hermann Goering. Again, forgive my pronunciations. Quote, "Of course the people don't want war, but after all it's the leaders of the country who determine the policy, and it's always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it's a democracy, a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament, or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That's easy. All you have to do is tell them they're being attacked and denounce the pacifists for a lack of patriotism and exposing the country to greater danger." End quote. I have given you his words to help you see why Padme said what she said, the character in Star Wars. Positive cosmic forces obviously inspired those words to be written for that character in the film to say at that significant time. Excuse me. It is my hope that you will consider this lesson as a word to the wise. The conditions and circumstances prevalent in the world at the time that this film was released were a precursor for the coming global conflict. These are but a few of the countless reasons why people everywhere have been drawn to see these films. People around the world will continue to be drawn to the final film in this trilogy and to the other Star Wars films, not just because of the quality of the entertainment value of the films, but more importantly because of the inspired messages that are being placed there for all of us. For the sake of these important messages, the higher self of each of hundreds of millions of people has been and will continue to be causing them to feel drawn to see these films. The lessons that the films contain have become and will continue to be part of the collective consciousness of humankind. For those very important reasons, and because of the high quality of the entertainment and the power within the story that is provided in these films, people all over the world will continue to view them, some doing so again and again, for a considerable number of years to come. Given the world events that are yet to come, and the great importance of the inspired messages that these trilogies contain, related to those events yet to come, it is my hope that people around the world will, at least on a higher level, a higher consciousness level, be given a greater understanding of what is ahead and the importance of the messages in the Star Wars films, and others related to those coming times. The Star Wars creator is now stating that he has completed the series and has told the story that he had always planned to tell. If that is so, then we thank him for his efforts and for the inspired story that his genius brought forth. We owe him a great deal. However, in 1977, when the first film was released, he was quoted at that time as saying that he had a story that would be told in 3 trilogies. Given the nature of the rest of the story, some of which is pointed out in the as part of Dune, the movie Dune, we would not be at all unhappy if the creator of Star Wars were to change his mind, but that appears not to be the case. Excuse me. The thread that is woven throughout the first released Star Wars trilogy and that entire series of films is the same as or very similar to the theme found in other films. The movie Dune, for example, carries a highly similar theme, but points out openly the very special child, which I would describe as symbolizing the master of the Aquarian Age, God's messenger to the world, whose work will in reality begin in the not-too-distant future. It is my belief that if the Star Wars series had continued with a third trilogy, it would have dealt with the coming of this special child. Other movies, such as Starman, Willow, and The Golden Child, do not have such elaborate stories, but nevertheless very plainly point out the special child who, in each story, is symbolic of the real person, the one who will, over a period of time, become recognized by some, perhaps in great numbers, as the master of the Aquarian Age, the Christ, in the same way that Jesus was the Christ and the master of the previous, or Piscean, or some say the Piscean Age. These films also call attention to the person who overcomes obstacles and negative forces in order to help make the way safe and to prepare the way and the world for the child, whose time, in reality, is not quite yet. The role of this one who must prepare the way in the world by helping humankind out of the darkness and back into the light so that they'll be more properly prepared to receive the one even greater, the special child, has been portrayed in the films in such a way as to indicate that he is one who will himself provide light. Excuse me. This is symbolized by the planet Jupiter. When it becomes a second sun, meaning symbolically second S-O-N, adding to the light already shining on the people of planet Earth, as depicted in the film 2010 or 2010, so that the Earth then has 2 S-U-N-S, meaning S-O-N-S. Even the beginning of the first film of the first released Star Wars trilogy shows the character Luke Skywalker looking quietly toward the horizon as the 2 suns, symbolizing S-O-N-S, are seen in the sky. The character Luke Skywalker, as indicated earlier, is symbolic of one of the 2 suns, the one who will prepare the world and the way for the other who is to come later. The character of Paul Atreides serves the same purpose in the film Dune, as does the film character known as the Chosen One in The Golden Child, and of course the character of Willow in the movie by the same name. At this time, I'm also compelled to mention again, offering a bit more information, another very special film that was released late in 2009. This very enlightening story is one that has already set new attendance records around the world, and for very good reason. The title of this film is Avatar, and I encourage you to see it if you have not already done so. It is hoped that the above information has somehow added to your knowledge and understanding of how such inspired stories are needed and therefore given through inspiration by the higher positive unseen cosmic forces in order to enlighten the higher consciousness, the higher selves of those in audiences around the world in order to help prepare us all for the changes to our world that began in earnest, very much in earnest, on September 11, 2001. That became more pronounced during the worldwide financial crisis of 2008, and that will be continuing for years yet to come. In addition to the many films which have been inspired over the years in order to act as guideposts by providing needed information to the higher consciousness of those in the audiences who would see them, many very worthwhile books have also been written over the years. Under the upcoming heading titled Book List, discussed in a later video session, we will provide the titles of a number of those books which we believe will be especially helpful to the seeker. At this time, however, it's my purpose to call to your attention one book title which I believe will provide unusually helpful information because of the nature of the rather straightforward story that it tells. This book, The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, tells a beautiful story. It tells of a man who was willing, if necessary, to give up everything and everyone, even those he loves dearly, in order to follow and serve God. This is a true seeker. Believe me when I tell you that there are exceedingly few in the world today, even among those who consider themselves devout, who would be willing to give up their friends, their jobs, or even their families if necessary, to be able to follow the path that God offers them, and to live a life of service as an instrument of God's will. It may never be needed that you give up all that the character in this particular book relinquished. It may not even be needed that you give up anything. Be assured, however, that if you are a serious seeker who wants to serve, then eventually, in this life or a future one chosen by your higher self, it will be needed that you are at least willing, deep in your heart, to give it all up in order to serve. Whether you'll be asked to actually give it up or not necessarily so, but you need to be willing at some point in time. Excuse me. I'm reminded here of the words of a poem titled December 25th that's included in a future session on poetry, which describes in part the literal way in which the Master Jesus gave up his life to set an example of what we must be willing to do, although not as literally as he did. Here are two verses from that poem written by this speaker, but only as an instrument of the source that provided it. It will give you, or help to give you, an idea of what I'm saying. Here's how it goes, those two verses. He truly gave up life that day to show us all that we should give our lives up too for God, though not so literally. To serve and worship him each day, in one way or another. To see each woman and each man as sister and as brother. That's just two verses. It goes on a little further. Now do not be alarmed at these things that you're learning. It's not required that a person wake up some morning and drastically change their whole life. Such changes are always made by personal choice, and almost always happen gradually over a period of many years, decades, or even lifetimes. No person is ever required or even asked to give up more than they are able. Be assured, therefore, that God would never tell you that you must do such a thing. Remember that we are all agents of free will. In fact, God has set up the law that states, as you sow, so shall you reap. And other than that, unless one requests such, there is no direct interference by God in our individual lives. Much of our future destiny, and note that the word is destiny and not fate, because if you believe in fate, you could become a child of fate. The word is destiny. That which we will reap tomorrow is determined by what we think, say, and do. In other words, what we sow today. Thank you for watching this session. In the next session, we'll complete this topic, Pilgrim's Progress, and begin discussing some disciplines of study that have been set up as additional guideposts along the way. In that coming session, we will include a brief discussion on the Tree of Life. I encourage you to find and print an image of the Tree of Life from the internet so that you can review it as you watch the next video. I hope and trust that you will watch. Thank you very much.